Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be starting a video where I read the YA Fantasy Goodreads Choice Awards nominees. I had this idea, I was like, I should read all of the YA fantasy. And then once I got that idea, I clung on to it and I was like, don't do it, don't do it. And I was like, must do it. So I'm doing it. I like the mad woman I am. I wrote down the 15 that are currently here, which if you didn't know, so it's first 15 and then it goes up to 20 and then it goes down to 10. And I'm going to try and predict the top 10. Almost always the top 10 are the ones that are in the top 15. Very few of the 5 write-ins actually get to the top 10 because it's very hard for them to make up for the votes that they didn't get in the first round. That makes it easier for me. So the top 15 at the moment are Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, Fable by Adrienne Young, The Kingdom of Bach by Marie Lu, These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron, Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, Earl Serpent Thorn by Melissa Basherdoust, A Song of Wreaths and Runes by Roseanne A. Brown, The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, All the Stars and Teats by Adeline Grace, and Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. So those are the top 15 for the moment, and I think I know 6 of those. Actually 7. I think I can figure out 7 of those. Also, my laptop just started whirring, so please ignore that. So the way I did this is I wrote down the average star rating, and I also wrote down how many ratings that these books have, and I put dots in the corners. So purple means that it has one of the top 10 highest number of ratings, and then the blue means it has one of the top 10 highest average ratings. And then there was 6 of those that overlapped, which means they have a pretty good chance of getting in if they're in both the top 10 highest average rating, but also the top 10 with the highest rating. So those are Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This might have changed because this and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes were like neck and neck for the same average rating, so those might have switched out. Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, and The Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. And I'm also definitely including A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, even though it doesn't have one of the top 10 average ratings. It has the most ratings with 154,000. The book that is second in the most amount of ratings is The Queen of Nothing, which only has 106,000 only. But compared, that is 50,000 more ratings. So it's definitely going to get in there because that is so many ratings, that is so many people that have read it. Hello everyone. So it's the 12th of November. The semi-final was announced a couple days ago. So there is, as I said, 5 more that have been added in to the 15 that I talked about earlier. And there's 2 of those that I think have a possibility of getting to the top 10. But as I said, did I say it in the first clip? It is hard because, I mean, I'm kind of a lazy person. I'm not going to think about what good books I've read this year. I'm going to just vote for what's in front of me. But there is 2 on here that have pretty good ratings and just a pretty large number of ratings, which is kind of the key to look at. The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levensteller. I have read this. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It's not that good. But that was added, and I do think it actually has the possibility of getting to the final 10 because it has 26,000 ratings, which is a pretty decent number. It doesn't have the best average rating. It has a 3.97, and like, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it, it means less reading for me if it gets into the top 10. Return of the Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. It has a very high average rating, but it is the 6th in the series, so, and it has a 4.56 average rating, and but it only has about 2,000 ratings on it. So I'm pretty sure we can count that out. So The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune was added in. I don't think this will get into the top 10, but I am very interested in reading it, but probably next year. So this has a 4.21 average rating and 3,215 ratings. Here comes our next one, which I think this also has a small shot of getting in, and that is Aurora Burning by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the sequel to Aurora Rising, and it has a 4.37 average rating and 11,000 ratings. Ray Bearer So it has a 4.47 average rating, but it does only have 2,400 ratings, which obviously that is a good amount of ratings, but when you're up against things with 100,000, 20,000, it just kind of doesn't compare. I think the Ballad on Songbirds and Snakes has a real advantage here. When I filmed that first clip, it had 154,000. It now has 161,000. So yeah, so I think that's all I'm going to say about it for now. So let's talk about the problems with the Goodreads Choice Awards. So my first problem is there were books on all of these lists that aren't even out yet. For example, in the YA fantasy, These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, which it isn't even coming out till nearly the final round is announced. How is that fair to her? Obviously, it's very impressive to get on the list, especially since she's a debut author, but I don't think it's giving her a very fair shot. There's also very hyped books like Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson and The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. These are very hyped books, but they're not coming out until around the final round as well. They're of course going to get votes because people are very excited for them. It doesn't give them a fair shot of winning, and it also doesn't give other authors who have released books earlier in the year, it doesn't give them the opportunity to be on the list, which could actually be very important to them. However, the fact that Ninth House won last year, it won in the adult fantasy category with more votes than it actually had ratings. So people were voting for it because they recognized Leigh Bardugo's names, or maybe because they just enjoyed the cover. Leigh Bardugo is a pretty big name. She's written Six of Crows, which is a hit among YA fantasy readers. And so obviously a lot of them were very excited for her debut adult. But maybe they just hadn't gotten the time to read it yet. But they still voted for it because they were like, I love Six of Crows, of course I'm gonna love this. But that's not necessarily true, because I didn't love it. I love Six of Crows. We also have to ask ourselves, can we fairly vote for a book when we haven't read its competition? I mean, I could read 9 of these 10 books, but I will never actually know whether the 10th one is better or worse until I have actually read it. Let's not talk about cover votes. The write-in votes really don't have a fair shot. I mean, as I said earlier, I'm kind of a lazy person. If you give me the opportunity to choose out of a list instead of having to think for myself, I'm obviously going to pick from the list that you gave. But this is actually one of the problems here that we can actually fix. Instead of having a round 1 where we give a head start to the 15 that are already there, how about we give round 1 to write in your favorite fantasies of the year, and then you can narrow it down from 20. Sequels can be a bit of a blessing and also a bit of a curse. See, sequels are always more likely to have a higher rating because people who didn't like the first book are less inclined to pick up the second book. So people who love the first book are probably pretty likely to at least enjoy the second book, therefore giving it a bit of a higher rating. So that's obviously a good thing, but the bad thing is it just doesn't have the ratings behind it because people like me who are trying to read maybe like the entire list, I'm never going to be able to read books that have like 6 books in the series. It really doesn't give those books a fair chance because not as many people are going to be 100% caught up on a series. Here comes the big one. So we have book A and we have book B. Book A has 5 ratings. Book B has 20 ratings. I really should have chosen a smaller number. So book A has 2 5-star ratings, 2 4-star ratings, and 1 2-star rating, which gives it an average rating of 4. I mean, sounds pretty good to me. Book B has 4 5-star ratings, 3 4-star ratings, 7 3-star ratings, 4 2-star ratings, and 2 1-star ratings. That gives it an average rating of 3.15 stars. So I'm looking for a book to read, and I'm kind of more inclined to pick up the one with the higher rating. I mean, surely it's better, right? Now, the Goodreads Choice Awards are coming up, and both of these books are nominated. Obviously, the one with the higher rating is gonna win, right? No, wrong. See? Here we have a very high average rating. 2 5 stars, 2 4 stars. Wow, that's majority like this book. Except for the fact, look down here. This book, while it only has a 3.15 stars average rating, it technically has more 5-star reviews than this. It has 4 5 stars compared to 2 5 stars. And that's exactly how the Goodreads Choice Awards work. By instead of 5, make it 5,000. Instead of 20, make it 20,000. A book with 5,000 ratings, but an extremely high average rating, is not going to win against a book that has a huge number of ratings, but a very low star. Take The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. It has not been getting very good reviews. It has about a 3.83 average rating, which isn't that great. But it has 160,000 people that have read it. And so you compare that to a small book on this list, maybe like Cemetery Boys, which has been getting absolutely incredible reviews. But it just doesn't have the same number of ratings. And while so many people are going to vote and absolutely adore Cemetery Boys, more people have read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and probably more people have rated it 5 stars. Yes, more people have rated it 1 star. This one had no 1-star reviews. This one has 2. So yes, more people hated this book, but also more people gave it 5 stars. So when it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter what your average rating is on Goodreads, because when it comes to the Goodreads Choice Awards, it really is a popularity contest. The books with the highest rating, with the amount of hype, they're the ones that are more likely to win. That's the big problem with the Goodreads Choice Awards. It's a popularity contest. I know I've been pretty negative here about the Goodreads Choice Awards, and while I think my criticisms are extremely valid, and these are the criticisms that basically the entire book community have, I will say there is definitely a positive note. A lot of authors really do appreciate the support and the votes that they get in these. I know for us it's just like, doesn't mean anything, but it can for any author, big or small, and especially for debut authors to see that love that their books are getting so much that they get nominated for these. It can definitely mean a lot to them. So I'm definitely not taking away from the fact that this can genuinely mean a lot for an author. I'm not taking away from that. So while the whole book community, we can make a joke out of it and have our fun with it, vote for authors that you do love. I know I've been complaining about you shouldn't do that because it's not fair to others, but I mean, it's not going to stop everyone else. So if you want to support your author by giving them a vote, I'm definitely not going to judge you for that, because I mean, everyone does it. It isn't all negative, but it is fun to make fun of. Hi everyone, so now the top 10 have officially been announced. I did have a peek. My 7 that I was sure were going to get in did actually get in, so good for me, I guess. Here are the actual top 10. So we have Fable by Adrienne Young. We have The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Legend Born by Tracy Dion. Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron. 7 of those I was right, and the 3 I was wrong about were Fable, Legend Born, and Cinderella is Dead. And they actually quite surprised me. Fable not so much, because it did have a decent amount of ratings and a very high average. Cinderella is Dead, when the first round opened, that was not in the top 10 rating wise or number of ratings. So I was quite surprised that I got in, but it did. So, and then Legend Born, I just didn't think it was going to have enough people that had read it to get into the top 10, because it only had 2,000 during the first round. Obviously people have read it since then, so they might have been voting for it as well. The bad part is I've only read 3 of those, so I gotta get moving. Also, I will only be reading Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi instead of Children of Virtue and Vengeance, because I haven't read the first book. And I will also be reading Skyward by Brandon Sanderson instead of Starsight. I have read 3 books, so let's talk about them, I guess. So the first one I will talk about, the one that I'll put the lowest for now, and that's going to be The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. I have very mixed feelings on this. Like, when I finished it, I gave it like a 3 or a 3.5, and then just the more I thought about it, the more I disliked it, and I ended up changing it down to a 2. I think I was trying to like it more than I actually did, because I wanted really badly to enjoy it, because it's a new Hunger Games book, which I didn't even love the Hunger Games in the first place. I don't know why I read this, but in the end I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. It was just messy, unnecessary, and it was just boring, to be honest. What I'm going to put in my second spot for now is going to be The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. It still says 4 out of 5 stars if you like go on my Goodreads, but it is definitely a 3 out of 5 stars. I was just it's kind of hard to explain. It was a lot of fun. So if I was only judging it on fun, it would be a 4 star, but it had problems and it didn't fit the tone of the rest of the series. So while I had fun with that book, looking back on it, I'm like, it's not that good of a book, especially since I gave The Wicked King, which I actually really enjoyed that book. I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars, and that is miles ahead of The Queen of Nothing, so I don't know why I gave them the same rating. it doesn't make sense. So The Queen of Nothing is definitely a 3 out of 5 stars. I'm not a big fan of Holly Black's writing style, and like it was a bit too happy, I guess, and it was definitely very weird pacing. There was lots of things left unanswered, but it was so much fun. It is currently in our 2nd position, and it will probably move down, or at least I hope it will. Oh my god. Then what's currently in our 1st place, which is a 4 out of 5 star book, and that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. And again, I actually had a couple of issues with this book. At the time when I finished it, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars because everyone seemed to love it. So I was like, I also have to love it. And I was like, oh, it might be a 5 star or maybe a 4.5. But I was like, no, I had issues with this. Stop trying. Just because everyone else loves it doesn't mean you'd have to. My main problem with that is I didn't feel connected to the characters, and there was a couple of issues I had with kind of nearly continuity. These are the children of the characters in The Infernal Devices, so it just doesn't make sense for me for them not to be so involved in this, and for their kids to be able to go out and do this adventure. Like, that doesn't seem like something they'd all do, let their kids kind of just roam off when there's this huge demon attacks and stuff. And I have a couple other things which are kind of spoilery, so I can't say why I didn't like it, those things. But my big one was characters. I fully expected to love these characters because from the short stories we had, I did. I loved what I had seen of them, and I just didn't continue to love them in the book. I thought, I'm going to get a full-length novel with all of these characters, which I already really like, and then I just didn't feel connected to like any of them except Jesse Blackthorne. I love him. I would die for him. Him and Lucy, and also kind of Grace's plotline is definitely the one that interests me the most, and that's really disappointing. I was so sure I was going to love James and Matthew and Cordelia so much, and I don't hate them by any means, but I just didn't feel connected to them, and I was like, meh. And I think the 2nd book is going to kind of have more focus on like Jessie and Lucy and maybe Grace, and I know Grace is not a good person but she is by far one of the most interesting characters in that book in my opinion. So I don't actually like her, but she actually interests me at least. So yeah, which is kind of an unpopular opinion, I think. Most people are just like, burn her, and I'm like, I don't like her, but at least she's interesting. I definitely liked, you know, Christopher and Thomas and Anna, but we didn't see enough of them. And I think that is another huge problem. There's too many characters in these. Like, that was like, I don't know, like an 800-page book or something, and it felt both too long and too short, because some of it, it was so long and I felt like not much was actually happening, but at the same time I didn't get to know anyone that well because there was just too many. So that being said, I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because I had a good time with it for the most part, but it was kind of just like some issues afterwards. So yeah, so those are the 3 that I've read so far, and I have 7 to go. I'm hoping to get at least 1 or maybe 2 5-star books. And that's all for now. I will check back in with you probably this evening when I finish Legendborn, or tomorrow. Hello everyone, it has been a while since I spoke to you last. When I last spoke to you, it was when the final 10 had been announced and I had read 3 of those. So I have since read 3 more, which is great. That's great progress, guys. But this video has taken an unfortunate turn where I'm not liking any of the books. So the first one that I read was Legendborn by Tracy Dion, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, which is a pretty decent rating. And I was like, it's only the first one, it'll go uphill from here. No, it went down. I have very mixed feelings on Legendborn because there is bits that I definitely liked, and I can definitely see why so many people love it. It has a very high average rating, but it just didn't do it for me. I really wanted to love this, especially with how much hype is going on. I don't like being the odd one out, you know, I don't like being quirky like that, but it just didn't do it for me. And I'm trying to think, maybe it might have been because I was listening to the audiobook. It started off very slow and there was a lot of info dumping. I felt like the author was just throwing words at me. Sometimes I wouldn't be after even clicking on like what this meant, and we'd be on to the next thing, and I was like, what is happening? So it definitely took a while to get used to it and to get into it, but the middle part was where I think it shone. I was starting to become more intrigued. I didn't love any of the characters, but I definitely saw a lot of potential, especially in the middle bit. I was getting more attached and I was getting more curious and I was really starting to get into the story. And then the end let me down as well. The start and the end, they're usually the strongest bits of a book, but for this it was complete opposite. The middle was where I think the best of it was. My biggest problem was I felt like it was all set up for the second book. For example, in a book like, I just filmed my December TBR. So in a book like The Shades of Magic, so in the first book we have the introduction to our characters and we have, you know, this magical stone that Kel has to return to Black London. And then in the second book there's the plot of this magical tournament going on. And then in the third book it's like everything that happened in the second and the first book has to come together and resolve it. I didn't feel like Legendborn had that kind of a structure. This reminded me more of The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, that one, it's written to be the one story. Like, the first book is literally just the start of the 3 books. And I felt very similar about Legendborn. And this was really just the start of it all. I didn't feel like there was any kind of resolution in this story. And I think that's going to happen in the sequel. So I'm definitely interested in picking up the sequel. But I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars in the end. On the list, I will have 2 3 out of 5 stars at the moment. One of those is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, and I'm going to put Legendborn above Queen of Nothing. So Legendborn moves into second place. So let's move on to the next book I read. Surely this will be better. No. I read Cinderella's Dead by Kaylin Bayron, and I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. I will put this above The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so that moves it into 4th place. I realized I don't like dystopian books. I didn't really like anything about this story, really. I found it very unrealistic, especially the ending. Okay, so I will put a spoiler warning on the screen now and mute me until the spoiler warning is gone. So at the end of the book, Sophia, our main character, kills the king and she faces no consequences for that. I'm like, I'm sorry. You're living in like this like town where they're stuck in their old ways and you just killed the monarch. And I'm like, please, you're gonna go get beheaded right now. But that didn't happen. She just convinced them that they're wrong. I'm like, what? No, I'm sorry, but you're gonna get beheaded. It would have been better as a series, or at least a duology, I think. Because I think with books like these, where they're like dismantling this whole system, it takes more than like 300 pages to do that. And in the end, we didn't really get to see that, in my opinion. I didn't really like any of the characters. There was one character I was actually very interested in, and then he disappeared at the start of the book and then appeared for like the last like 20 pages. We're told that our main character is absolutely in love with this girl, and then like the second another pretty girl comes along, she's like, I'm in love with her. And I didn't see any chemistry between them at all. I didn't like any of the characters really. Like, they were all meh. They were just very underdeveloped, very boring. I didn't think there was any chemistry between the relationships. I think I just had very different expectations. What I thought it was going to be, it went a completely different direction, which is fine, but I would have much preferred it to go the direction I thought it was when I picked it up. The pacing was just really weird. I felt like nothing happened for most of the book, and then at the end just everything happens and then it's not really resolved fully, I think, and the ending is optimistic. So yeah, I definitely think this would have been better as a duology, so she could have developed these ideas more. That brings us to the next book, which is my 6th book that I'm reading. It's moving into 6th place real quick, and that is Fable by Adrienne Young, and I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars. Remember when I told you we went downhill? Yeah, we went real downhill. I hated this book so much. Not a thing in this book that I enjoyed. It was so boring. The only good thing actually was that it was quick. I read it in a day because I had nothing else to do. Otherwise I would have just like binge watched YouTube videos if I had some to watch, but I didn't have any, so I was like, oh, I guess I'll read this book, and it's one of the most boring books I read this year. The characters, so bland. I couldn't tell you anything about any of those characters. Like, there was like 2 background characters and I was like, I don't know which one's which. Again, kind of the same complaints as Cinderella's Dead. A romantic relationship appeared out of nowhere. No chemistry. I just didn't like it. The plot, nothing happened in it. Absolutely nothing. And I don't understand. It says such a high rating. I don't get it. I don't get it, guys. There was magic. It wasn't explained. I had no idea what it was. The writing was so boring and repetitive. I didn't like that. Probably not a good idea to read it directly after I finished The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, which is obviously an epic adult fantasy that is set around traders and ships and pirates and all of that stuff, because this is about, you know, traders and ocean and pirates and sailing, and it's also a fantasy, but nowhere near as good. Yeah, definitely not a good idea to read it directly after that because it was not gonna compare. I'm gonna be so mad, guys, if Chain of Gold is the top of this list because I don't even like that book that much. I mean, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars, so I did like that book, but like, it's like not even in my like top 20 of the year, I don't think. That's my like 11th favorite Cassandra Clare book. YA fantasy / sci-fi, redeem yourself. Anyway, that's all for now.